This episode of Tales from the Backlog, just like every episode, is brought to you by the wonderful patrons of the show. Some personal heroes of mine like Chris Nelson, the Top 3 Podcast crew, Zulgeek, Eric Guess, Rick Firestone, Nick Vicori, Jill, Soccer, ZNA, Cupcake, Kyle, Christian S., Matt aka Stormageddon, JD, Doug Lief, Jason Emery, Rob Shack, Brian Skirsha, Randall, and many more have all chosen to go to patreon.com/realdavejackson to kick me a few bucks and help support the show. I appreciate all of you very much, and if you listening would like to help support your favorite podcaster named Dave, once again, that's patreon.com/realdavejackson. Just a couple bucks a month gets you some bonus content, the ability to vote on polls for future episodes of the show, and much more. Any and all support in any form is always appreciated, and with that being said, let's monkey. Hello everybody, my name is Dave Jackson, and you're listening to Tales from the Backlog. This is a video games review podcast where each week I'm joined by a guest to bring a game out of the backlog, play it, and discuss. My guest today is a friend of the show, host of the Nostalgium Arcanum podcast, and grog enthusiast, Doug Lief. Doug, welcome to the show.
Avast, ye scurvy landlubber! I'm really looking forward to this one. We can talk like pirates all we want, because this is a time to be silly for sure.
Hell yes, it is. Today we're going to talk about The Secret of Monkey Island, but before we get into talking about pirates and grog and monkeys, assumedly, I want to give you a chance at the top of the show to talk about Nostalgium Arcanum, a podcast which I've guested on and is a really good time. So tell everyone what the show's all about.
Sure. It is, as the name suggests, it's a nostalgia-based show. So it's all about the pop culture things from yesteryear that people are kind of still obsessed with. I always tell the guests, like, hey, what's that thing that you won't shut up about and no one wants to hear you talk about it anymore? Well, you can come and talk about it with me. It's movies, games, TV shows, anything, and about the guest's emotional connection to that IP and why they're still, enamored with it all these years later.
Yeah, exactly. So I was a guest on the Pokemon episode of the show because, of course, I was. That's probably the thing I'm most nostalgic for is those early days of Pokemon. And something I like about the show, and it's different from this show and different from critique shows. You're not critiquing these things. You're celebrating nostalgia.
Mostly, yeah. I mean, if the thing is something I'm not super into, I'm not going to pretend I like it. But
sure, right.
But yeah, no. The point is not to necessarily break the thing down beat by beat. It's generally a very positive, just like, this thing is so cool. Let's talk about why this thing, is worth going back to and why people, still love it.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like at least someone on the show has warm, fuzzy feelings about the thing you're talking about, which is not always the case on this show.
Well, we're truth tellers, Dave. That is our ultimate goal.
That's true. Yeah.
Yep.
So I give everyone the recommendation to check out Nostalgium Arcanum at the top of the show. Down in the show notes, you'll find links to check it out. And perhaps if there's something you're nostalgic about, Doug would have you on and talk about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. If anyone's interested in they've got that thing that's that's just burning a hole through them that they just can't contain it and want to talk about it. Yeah, hit me up. I think it'd be a great episode. Whatever, as long as you're passionate about the thing, then it'll be a good time.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of nostalgia, like I said, today we're talking about a game that I think a lot of people have nostalgia for, The Secret of Monkey Island, which is a point-and-click adventure game developed and published by Lucasfilm Games for PC in 1990, with an enhanced edition remake developed and published by LucasArts in 2009. And if you have not played The Secret of Monkey Island, this is the way the show always is. Every episode, spoiler policy is, we will not spoil the story for you during the bulk of this episode. There will be a spoiler wall. You can check down in the show notes for a timestamp for when the Spoilers begin, so don't worry if you haven't played. Not that this game has like a story that would be ruined if you even watch the ending on YouTube or something like that, but you know how people are about spoilers, so that's the way the show is. Elevator pitch, if you have never played The Secret of Monkey Island and you don't know what it is, I say this is a swashbuckling classic adventure game with a slick sense of humor.
So for my elevator pitch, just assume my arms are flailing wildly because I think I have to do this. I have to do this as Stan. And if you don't know who Stan is, we'll get to him. But
right.
Say there, friend, chum, good buddy. Do you like Monty Python? Do you think pirates are cool? Do you hate dying in video games? Well, have I got the point-and-click adventure for you? It has everything. Pixels, a user interface, rubber chickens. Come on down to Stan's previously owned floppy disks, the best electronics store in the Tri-Island area, and pick up your copy of The Secret of Monkey Island trademark today.
I'm glad you threw that trademark in there. Yeah, that was excellent. Great elevator pitch and great voice by Stan. Of course, we'll talk about Stan later. Playtime. So I played the Enhanced Edition remake. I never played the original. I played the remade version because I know myself. That's probably the best course of action for me. It took me 6 hours to complete, and I used a guide for the majority of the game. So maybe if I were playing without a guide, that would probably be significantly longer. How about you? Where have you played this, and how long would you say it takes?
So this will kind of merge into talking about our histories with the game. I did not play this back when it was, fresh in 1990. This was actually a blind spot for me. My first Monkey Island game was actually the third one, which is, fairly similar, although it doesn't have the cute and charming pixel art style of the early 90s. It looks more like a fully animated cartoon, and it's wonderful. It's a great game. So I never actually got around to the original Monkey Island until that remake came out, and I played it on my PS3, just knowing hey, I'm a point and click adventure guy. This was just something I wanted to have under my belt. So I don't remember how long it actually took me to beat. This time I had a little technical trouble getting the thing to run, so I just went with watched a playthrough on YouTube just to kind of remind myself of what was in it.
Yeah.
So the way I would play a point and click adventure game back when I was actively playing them a bunch as a kid, I would not play them in one big setting. I think the kind of the ideal way to play these things is you pick it up and you kind of push at the edges of it for an hour. You click on things. Maybe I didn't click on this before. Maybe I didn't try to say this thing or combine this item. And over the course of a long period of time, you would slowly make more progress. I think trying to chug these games, any point and click adventure game really, in one long play session, or if you're the kind of person that says, I got to finish this game before I start the next one, you might be doing yourself a little bit of a disservice. I think there's something to the fact that this is a very strong and unique flavor of game that maybe you don't want to do it all in one shot. So I would think your playtime might be spread across a very long period of time in little chunks that might collectively add up to 12 hours. It's hard to say. But
Gotcha.
definitely use a guide if you're struggling. I would too.
I guess we'll just pick up on that. So you said that you never played this game back in the day, but you said that you were into point and clicks. So what's your kind of experience with this genre? Because I think there's a reason that you and I are like a good yin and yang on this particular episode.
Yeah, and that may just have something to do with the fact that I'm about 10 years older than you, so that they were, this was more of just in the style in the early 90s. And I mentioned, I don't know if you ever got around to it, but did you screw around with Zork at all?
I did, yeah, actually I did.
Yeah, so Zork is a purely text adventure. This is a graphical adventure. And kind of one of the reasons I said, hey, check that out, is because Monkey Island really sits on, this continuum of game design. And it's this next evolutionary step from something like Zork, where there is no graphics and it's literally telling you Dungeons and Dragons style, you're standing in a tavern. There is a mug of grog on the bar, and you type in pick up grog, and it says, you can't do that. I don't understand what you mean. And you say, okay, right. Get grog, and then you pick it up, right? And then there were some ones that had slight graphical stuff, and then you get to something like this where you're pointing and clicking in a truly visual interface. And then that moves on to things like Myst. So this was really popular, and it was a really nice respite in a lot of ways, because virtually all games for the NES, and I know there's some exceptions to this, but for the most part, your gaming experience for the 80s, for the Atari, the NES, and like the early days of like 16-bit stuff was jump, shoot, run to the right, dodge everything, right? With a handful of like sports things thrown in, and one or two things like this. And so this was, I think, this game and games like it were a way for people who maybe were not, were not good at stuff that it required twitchy reflexes or didn't, just were not in the mood for that. It was a way to kind of settle down and do something more cerebral. And as we'll talk about, these games kind of live and die in the writing. So, so for me, it was like, as much as I enjoyed all the, jumping and shooting and running to the right, it was really cool to settle into a different gameplay mode, explore a space, and kind of be enthralled by something that was more, like I said, about the story, or at least the moment-to-moment writing, the snappy dialogue, than anything else.
Gotcha. So what were some of the games, if you weren't playing The Secret of Monkey Island, what were some other point and clicks that you played back in that time?
So I was definitely a fan of a lot of the Sierra games. There were definitely King's Quest VI was way up there for me. There were a lot of these. I definitely played some of the Space Quest games as well. The Westwood studio also put out a bunch. So that was like your main pillars were Sierra, and then Lucas, the Lucas games like this one. And then Westwood was kind of like was the RC Cola, but the Carandia series was really good. There were a lot of these, and for some reason, I didn't play as many of the Lucas ones back in the day. I don't have an explanation as to why.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, I guess you go along with any media long enough, you're just not going to get to everything, and there's not a good reason for it. You just don't. No. So for me, so I grew up, I remember we had a computer in like the early 90s. I remember that because we had some games. I had like a game where you took pictures of dinosaurs and like the Oregon Trail and shit like that. Like, so I remember I played Myst was the first like non-edutainment game I think I played, and I was way too young to play Myst.
We're all too young to play Myst. It's it's very obtuse. We actually did an episode of our show on it, and
right.
Our mutual friend Cole Ross was kind enough to drop by there. But that game is, it's almost like the absence. It's the inverse of something like Monkey Island, which is constantly talking to you and cracking jokes, and Myst is like, here, wander through this empty island alone.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think I might have been better served to play something like Monkey Island or, a similar game back then, but I didn't. So this was not a part of my growing up playing video games. I struggle to think of any like traditional point and click game that I played until this one, except for The Last Door, which I played for the podcast last year. So this was like familiar because The Last Door is very much like this. Obviously less dialogue and more horror than Monkey Island, but that's basically all my experience. So like wanting to play this game is basically the result of hearing other people talk about how they grew up playing this. Similar to other stuff like this that I've done on the show, like the reason I wanted to play Chrono Trigger and Metal Gear Solid, just stuff that I missed when I was growing up. So this is part of that like gaming history curiosity tour, and to get into some opening thoughts about it, I thought that this was a really fun game. I think the humor holds up really, really well. I consistently found this to be entertaining from that perspective. I also come out of this with the knowledge about myself that my brain just doesn't work with how these puzzles and things work. I am either too impatient or too something to really wrap my head around what these games want me to do. So with a guide, I enjoyed this because of the writing and the story and the humor, not because of the gameplay.
So I'll give you my opening thoughts. This is not, I don't think this is the best point and click adventure game. It's not my favorite. I don't know that it's even the best Monkey Island game, but what it is foundational.
Right.
Almost every point and click adventure game after this owes a debt to it. I think it did a lot for just the concept of how humor is woven into games in general, because just like any, there's one thing about kind of watching games evolve as a medium is it's a little similar to like you watch movies evolve, right? You go back to silent films or black and white films. There's a language to how movies get across stories and concepts and deliver jokes that is endemic to that medium. And people had to learn like, oh, okay, this is different than doing a stage play, right? How do we, convey some idea with film and do something maybe we can't do live on a stage? And games are the same way. It's like, okay, yes, we can put an obvious, like straightforward setup punchline into the game, but it has to work with how you're interacting with the world and be delivered a certain way. And with this, everything had to be delivered via text. There was no voice acting at the time. That was added in for the later remake. So I think the game does a lot. I think, if you ever decide, hey, maybe I will go back and play a point and click adventure game, I think this one's it's pretty good. It holds up, like you said. But there are others that are better. So it just depends on, like, do you want the historical experience of saying like, oh, I've now played this famous game that's always on the list of like 100 greatest games ever made. Right. Or do you want to say, oh, what's the thing that picked up this ball and ran with it that might be a smoother ride in terms of the gameplay itself?
Yeah, and not to kind of spoil future thoughts about the genre, but if I do play another one, I think I will kind of just skip the foundational pieces and go more with the ones that have, like you said, took the ball and run with it, basically. So we'll get into that, though. So we'll take a little music break. We'll listen to some of the awesome Monkey Island music. When we come back, we're going to set up the story and talk about the writing and stuff like that. So in The Secret of Monkey Island, you play as Guybrush Threepwood, who arrives on Melee Island with the hopes of becoming a pirate. The name Guybrush Threepwood should tell you what kind of writing and humor we're dealing with in the story. That's clue number one. Just to set it up, at the beginning, you kind of wander into a local bar. You are instructed to talk with the local, quote, important-looking pirates in the bar who are eager to help you. They explain that in order to become a pirate, you need to complete the 3 trials. You need to get a sword and defeat the sword master. You need to find buried treasure on the island, and you need to steal a relic from the governor's mansion. You also hear tales of the dangerous local ghost pirate LeChuck, who's hanging out nearby doing ghost pirate stuff. And off you go. And I said at the beginning, the story is like, the plot is not the most important part of this game. I don't think you can guess where the story's going, but the beat-by-beat plot is not what's going to be like driving you through the game, in my opinion. So it's just like a fun little jaunt through the island in various locations in that sense,
It feels a little more like akin to like if this were not a point-and-click adventure game, it would be a sketch comedy movie, which is kind of why I mentioned Monty Python at the beginning. Like think of like Holy Grail. Like the plot of Monty Python and the Holy Grail doesn't hang together at all. There's barely one, but minute to minute, like funny bits and sketches are happening. Exactly. And that's a little bit of what the story is like here. So yeah, the overarching plot is kind of a nothing. There are certainly point and click adventure games that do have more interesting overarching plots, but that's not really the point. The point is just to have silly fun along the way.
Right. And the writing in this game really supports the idea of moving you from funny scene to funny scene to funny scene. This is a comedy game. And I think I've talked about on the podcast before, or I've said these words out loud somewhere before. It all runs together at this point. But humor in video games is pretty hit and miss. It's probably as hit and miss as sketch comedy is. Sketch comedy can either be really fucking funny or it can be the worst thing you've ever watched. And sometimes, like, if you're watching a sketch show, the funniest thing you've ever seen will be followed up by, what the fuck is this? Like, who thought this was funny? Games kind of feel like that to me too. Like, games that try too hard to be funny are often not funny. They're just kind of embarrassing sometimes. This game's not like that. I thought this game was very funny, really well written.
Yeah, this is a joint by Ron Gilbert and Tim Schafer, who's that name I think your audience would probably know from things like Psychonauts,
right?
And
Brutal Legend.
Brutal Legend, which is funny. I don't think Psychonauts and Brutal Legend are, they are very funny games. Whether you like the gameplay, there's a lot of issues with those, I think. But that's one of those things where like people love those games largely because the writing speaks to them, not so much the wireframe. Mm-hmm. And like one thing these guys know really well, they have a phenomenal sense of tone. And so they know how to like play to the tone and like the wavelength that this game and their audience is in, which is I think why you felt like you enjoyed it. Like they know how to like consistently hit this mark, and they just keep doing it. That like it just seems like, well, what would be a random or funny thing to happen in this game? And it kind of goes to something that this is more of a gameplay thing, but it's always talked about, right? When you're playing a stealth game, you want it to be fun even when you get caught, right? Mm-hmm. Which is just a way of saying like when you're not playing the game perfectly the way the designers idealized you would be playing, can you still have fun with the game? Mm-hmm. And for a point and click adventure game, the vast majority of times that you're going to point on something and click, you're going to do something wrong, right? There's mostly a fairly prescriptive path of like, these are this is how you use this item. Mm-hmm. So they have to make all of the wrong answers funny. And so I think they largely succeeded at that. A lot of the pleasures of this game and the better ones in this, better point and click adventures, I remember just having fun as a kid, just like walking around, just going like, I wonder what happens if I click on this. And 9 times out of 10, if it's something entertaining, I don't mind so much that I'm not progressing the story or clicking on the right thing. At least I'm having fun just screwing around.
Yeah, even those little messages you get, like let's say you try to interact with something that you're just not doing the puzzle the right way, and Guybrush will say like, ooh, that looks disgusting or something like that. But the way the voice acting works, the way that it's written better than my brain just wrote out that little line right now. You're right. That is really entertaining. I'm glad you mentioned the word random in there, because this did feel kind of like we need an item, right? Where you need an item to use on a zip line. What is the most random thing you can think of? And they're like, oh, okay, well, what if you had a rubber chicken with a pulley wheel in the middle of it? That's pretty random, right? And I think it walks this line really well. Again, kind of like humor, where like they're choosing these random things, but they fit in the game. It's not, oh, look at this. It's such a random thing. It's a rubber chicken. No one really like comments on it in that way. It's a lot of these things are played off as normal things in the game, which I think kind of helps that fit. I mean, there's a rubber chicken with pulley wheel in the middle shops in the town that you go into. So I think that strikes a good balance.
Yeah, all of the pirates are in on the joke, right?
Yeah.
This world makes sense to them. And so when Guybrush is mostly the only one who will point out when things are weird or, confusing. It took me a long, I think until this go around with the game to like realize, oh, now I understand the joke, because French for chicken is poulet. So I finally got the like, oh, pulley, poulet. Oh, got it. And like, that's really, really like obscure and stretching it. But like, not every item in the game is that weird, but they are like funny versions of things. So like grog, which in real life would be, it's like whiskey and water or something. Like here, it's this glowing green stuff that like eats through the floor. Right. And this like cartoon logic is always in play. And you talked about like the puzzles and like sort of feeling like, oh, I don't know why should I use this rubber chicken on the zip line? Like when you do have the realization of what to do, the better point and click adventure games, and I think this one is in that category. It's like, it's lateral thinking, but it's never so non-obvious as to feel like, oh, well, I just have to take every object in my inventory and rub it on every pixel on every screen until something happens, right? Mm-hmm. That's when you're struggling of like, this is a bad game or poorly designed. It has to ride that line between like, put the key in the keyhole level of obvious, versus, what I just described. So like if it's right in that sweet spot, then it feels really good to make those deductions. And it all plays into the writing, because usually if it's funny, that's going to be, somewhere around where the answer is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another kind of like descriptor that I had written down to like kind of give people an idea is like, this is like early to mid 90s Weird Al humor. If you're thinking about like the kinds of things that Weird Al would put in his songs during like early era Weird Al.
Yeah, if you've seen the film UHF, his movie, that's a very good kind of analog to the style of joke that's here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all, well, as far as I remember, yeah, it's all very PG, very kid friendly in a lot of ways. I mean, I don't think I'm missing anything in my memory there that would be like too adult, So yeah, Weird Al was the thing I wrote down to give you kind of a tone example. I have a couple of examples here for like other things that I just thought were funny. You mentioned in your elevator pitch, whenever they say the words Melee Island or Monkey Island in conversation, they have the little TM superscript for trademark after them, which I always thought is great. Lots of fourth wall breaks. There's a narrator in the game. The narrator will cut in to talk about what's going on sometimes. Little stuff like that adds to it.
Totally. And part of it is that this game was originally developed, again, before voice acting was added. So there are jokes in the game that are like purely text based. That like the one that comes to mind is you meet a character who he says something about like, my favorite kind of piracy is conspiracy, and it's supposed to be spelled because conspiracy. That joke doesn't work in audio form.
Right.
That's rare. Most of the jokes in the remaster still work even with the voice acting. The remaster is kind of nice because you can at a moment flip back to the original art style and game, like with a touch of a button, it goes back to being the original version of the game. Did you mess around with the old school one at all?
No, I read that, or like you told me about it. I looked in the settings for like a couple seconds. I didn't see it, and I was like, "Oh, I'll look into that later," and then I forgot. So
yeah, I believe on the the PlayStation version, it was like with like the triggers, you could just toggle it anytime you felt like it. It would just go zoop back and forth, which is cool. I think the pixel art in this game it's not the best pixel art of this era, but it's pretty good. If you want to have a good time and you're really into like retro pixel art, point and click adventure games are a good place to look because they have these mostly static backgrounds, so they could get away with more detailed, lush, interesting painterly environments. So there's some cool stuff there. So yeah, and the other thing that the pixelated version does to some degree, that makes the pixel hunting in the environment a little easier because it's that old school 640 by 480 resolution. So sometimes the interactable things actually jump out a little more or are easier to spot in the original looking version than they actually are in the remaster, where it's more like a cartoon design.
Interesting. Yeah. I had written down for talking about visual things that I did think that the things you need to interact with generally stood out well. So like there was some pixel hunting, but not as much as, I feel like the guy who's only seen the Boss Baby making Boss Baby comparisons to every movie now, but compared to The Last Door, which had like this really chunky pixel art style, but it also meant that you did have to pixel hunt to find keys and stuff like that. And I didn't really feel like I had to do that very often in most of this game. I'll talk about places where I had to do that. Like there are a couple of overworld map screens that you go to move from location to location. Yep. And sometimes the locations you can actually visit are not keyed on the map. You have to just kind of hover over the whole thing. And then you'll see, oh, wait, there's a thicket in here that wasn't marked. And there's something there. So I need to like go back and kind of pixel hunt this entire map screen to find locations to visit. Other than that, though, not a whole lot of pixel hunting for keys and shit like that, which drives me crazy.
Yeah, obviously that's another metric of like how good is this point and click adventure game, is how much time do I spend just taking my mouse and sweeping it left to right, up and down the screen until the icon changes and I recognize, oh, there's something there. There are some modern ones, and I can't remember if the Monkey Island remaster does this. I guess it doesn't because you played it, but I think maybe the day of the Tentacle remaster does this. I know that Thimbleweed Park, which is a throwback made by the same team, will have a thing where I think if you push a button, your cursor will cycle to like the next available thing to click on.
Okay.
Or there are games that where you can press something to make the clickable things light up and to kind of eliminate that problem. Because, yeah, that can be very frustrating. You can spend hours walking around in one of these games going like, well, I can't make any progress. And it's because the thing you need to find or interact with is very small and kind of, hidden within the environment.
Yeah, it was an issue I had in The Last Door. I did still have that issue here, but
this game is not immune from that, for sure.
Yeah. And I did have that issue where like I would go in a room, I would feel like I was pretty comprehensive in like clicking on stuff and examining, and just about like half of the rooms that I went in, there was something else that I was like, oh, okay, I think I've clicked on everything, and I didn't. There was something else that I just kind of brushed over and, didn't interact with. So it did still happen, but I am like kind of half and half, like, oh, maybe it's the game's fault, but also there's a part of me and my personality when I'm playing games like this where I really struggle to be comprehensive,
Yeah, like I said, there is a version of these games where like literally all you can do is go, well, there is a limited number of interactable objects and people, and so I just need to try every combination of two things I can find until something happens. That's obviously when these things are poorly designed. Like I said, there's a happy medium where you're making deductions and you're struggling, but at least the struggling is funny to tie it back to the writing.
Right.
And it's kind of singing. I think this game is, like I said, it's not the best at this because it's early on in the genre of these games. There are others where this got smoother and better. But they never totally go away. It is a little bit of a hazard of this genre. I'm trying to think of other like comedy things that are worth noting here, but I think you kind of hit them all. You've got memorable characters on your list here, and I think that's the other secret sauce here is that there's a lot of really fun characters here, so much so that almost every character that you really like guaranteed to show up in the sequels. They're all there.
Yeah. I did write that down as something to note because, again, like the plot of this is not super memorable, but some of the characters like Guybrush and the old shop owner and Stan, who we've heard from earlier in the podcast, the cannibals that you meet are all really memorable for one reason or another. I think a lot of that has to do with really, really charismatic voice acting throughout. Again, I played the Enhanced Edition, which has full voice acting, and it's really, really good voice acting, very cartoonish and fun.
Yeah, these are all the same voice. Like I said, the voice acting came in the series with Monkey Island 3, and they've brought all of those voice actors back for. There was Monkey Island 4, there was a Telltale series, and there was also this recent one that was just released. Same voice cast, and it's the same voice cast they brought back for the remasters of Monkey Island 1 and 2 because they're excellent to a man. I think Dominic Armato, who plays Guybrush, it's an interesting task because with the original two games, obviously with no voice acting, you have to find someone who slots in, and everybody at that point would have had their version in their head of what Guybrush and these characters sound like. And I think he's great. Like he's like the right level of like he's milquetoast sort of, but he's also like he rides that line between like competent and incompetent. He's almost like a combination of Johnny Depp and Orlando Bloom's characters from Pirates of the Caribbean. He's kind of sits right in there. He's a little bit of a scallywag, but he's also kind of like not well. As we'll get to the story, he doesn't belong in the Caribbean very much. Right. And there's people have pointed out like the similarities between Monkey Island and the Pirates of the Caribbean series. There's a lot of competing stuff online as to like whether the Pirates screenwriters stole stuff from Monkey Island. And I think kind of what I've gathered from researching the stuff is to the degree they're similar, it's largely because they're both drawing on the same underlying pool of piratey stuff. Yeah. So, for example, the guys who made Secret of Monkey Island will cite the original Disney ride, Pirates of the Caribbean, as an influence. So, of course, that stuff is going to show up in that and the movie. The one thing I found was that the screenwriters who were working on Pirates of the Caribbean were struggling with it. And the thing that from Monkey Island that helped them crack it was the idea of introducing supernatural elements, like, ghosts and pirate skeletons. Yeah. Like that kind of pirate lore is what made those movies different and fun. So if you like the humor in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, you're going to find a lot to like here as well. And the characters, I think, bear that out, right? You mentioned Stan. There's some really fun characters that come in the sequel. For one thing, they do a lot more with Governor Elaine Marley. She becomes much more of like a spunky, very funny character, which, she's in this, she's a little bit, in the background. She doesn't do very much. She's a huge part of the sequels. There's a character named Murray who's just a severed skull who just yammers away at you, like S-rank character, really funny. They did not backport him into this game with the remaster, but he's great. So Dominic Armata's great. I want to shout out Earl Bowen, who plays LeChuck. And if you don't know who Earl Bowen is, if you've seen Terminator 1, 2, or 3, he's Dr. Silberman. He's the guy that like Sarah Connor like puts that needle full of liquid plumber up to his neck to escape the asylum. He's that guy. So that is LeChuck. And he's awesome as well with that perfect like piratey villain growl. And you've got, I think, Rob Paulson is playing a bunch of small parts in there. So another veteran voice actor. So yeah, great cast all the way through.
Sorry, just doing a little bit of research here because Stan has multiple voice actors.
Oh, wow. They replaced him. Okay. They all sound pretty much the same. I mean, you heard me do it. It's not that unique of a voice.
Hey, what do we have to do to get you into a new podcast?
Yeah, he is the quintessential like 80s version of, a used car salesman.
Yeah.
Right down to the ridiculous plaid jacket.
Yeah.
And sales pitch. Like he feels like he's right out of like, you could picture a comedian talking about buying a used car in a spotlight in front of a brick wall at the Improv. That's, he's
and
very much
Stan's
that
voice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really, really memorable characters throughout. And it's tough to talk. Like, I don't want to sit here and list like individual funny jokes out of context, but like it is really like scene to scene. Sketch comedy is a good way to talk about it. Like, so the governor's mansion is guarded by guard dogs, and you hear about these fearsome dogs before you go over there. And you go over in front of the governor's mansion, and it's a bunch of poodles in front of the mansion. But they're not just regular poodles; they're piranha poodles.
Yeah, shades of like the rabbit in Holy Grail, right? It's a it's a seemingly harmless animal that will chew your face off.
Yeah, and the way that you incapacitate the poodles is again kind of like a quote random solution to it, but it's funny. And then you get after you incapacitate it, you get like a big message that comes up on the remaster, at least the remake, that says like no animals were harmed in the making of The Secret of Monkey Island, stuff like that.
Yeah, the narrator comes on and I think tells you like, don't worry, they're sleeping.
Yeah.
It's very funny. And like I said, it's G-rated. It's, it's meant to be fun. And they are, like you said, breaking the fourth wall all the time. They're very aware of the audience, and that it's not a minus, it's a plus. Like it doesn't detract from the humor. It gives them more license to make this more of a cartoon. And the more cartoony it is, the best part of that is that it's folded into the gameplay. So the like I said, the puzzle solutions fit the cartoon logic in a way that helps you a little bit make your way through the puzzles.
Yeah. I also, as far as the cartoony kind of vibe of it goes, I want to shout out the music, which I think is excellent throughout. I had this music stuck in my head like the entire, like 2 or 3 weeks when I was kind of picking away at this game, just constantly around the house humming the main theme to this. It's super catchy. And again, we're setting up a cartoon pirate, a pirate cartoon, and the music kind of fits that, I think, too.
Yeah, I used to be, for many years, I was part of an improv troupe. And one of the things I did when I wasn't on stage was I would be manning lights and sound off stage. Mm-hmm. And so we had a big library of music that was designed for, whatever genre the show kind of evolved into. We'd have something ready to go. So if it was sci-fi, I'd have a bunch of electronic stuff. And if it went piratey, I had this. I had, Monkey Island tracks galore to fill in for that. And this is, I think, some of the best pirate music ever done. Like it's perfectly out of, these older pirate movies from like, say, the 40s and 50s, with just a little like fun, mischievous cartoon flair. It's not the like Hans Zimmer stuff of Pirates of the Caribbean. It's not that swashbuckly. It's, it's lighter.
Yeah. Yeah, and people will hear that music as they listen through this episode. Again, it's really, really good. I think this is a good time to take that music break, listen to some more, come back, and we'll talk about the gameplay in The Secret of Monkey Island. So this, as a point-and-click adventure game, you are kind of walking around the levels, clicking on objects, and talking with people. I will say, after playing The Last Door on Switch, I'm really glad I played this on PC, because it's just, I mean, they were made for a mouse. I would not want to play this, hunting for interactable objects with a control stick. But on PC, it was good that way.
Yeah, absolutely. You would want to play these on something with a mouse. That is by far ideal. Like I said, because you're going to hit points where you're like, what do I do? And you, by hoving the mouse back and forth over the screen, the icons might change. Something will happen to let you know, hey, I can interact with this.
Yeah.
And you're not just randomly clicking. Like, there is a language to how you point and click. It's interesting because you did not play it in the original format, so you didn't really get a good taste of the SCUM engine, SCUMM, which this team developed for Maniac Mansion. The MM in SCUM is for Maniac Mansion. And this is the evolution of like Zork, like I was talking about, where it used to be like, okay, you type in go to door, right? Now you can say walk, you can click on the thing that says walk to, and then you click on the door and Guybrush will do it, which would then be evolved a little more. Just click on the door, he'll walk to it. But you have in the SCUM engine, I think 9 bespoke verbs, which it's like walk to, push, pull, pick up,
open, close, stuff like that.
Right. And those are that helps solve that problem that I mentioned earlier, where it's like, pick up mug. Oh, you can't pick up the mug. I have to say get mug to make it happen. This is like, no, we give you the verbs. But of those verbs, a lot of them are kind of special use cases. There's not a whole lot of pushing and pulling and opening and closing like once in a while. Usually it's just picking up stuff, using the things in your inventory, or talking to people. So it's a very simple interface, but it's like that's all you really need to make one of these games happen.
It was interesting to me because I did look at the original game. I watched some stuff on YouTube the other day, and they had those commands on the bottom of the screen. So they had the list of those verbs. And in the remake, you have to pull up a menu. And so you have a menu with your verbs, and then you have a different menu with your items. So in order to do one of these interactions, you'd have to pull up both menus, click on this, then click on the item. Sometimes you'd have to say give item to blank, or combine. I don't remember if combine is one of them. I'm playing.
Yeah, you combine items together for sure.
I was going to say I'm playing Resident Evil right now, so combine is in my head. But sometimes you have to navigate back and forth between these two menus. And it did kind of make me wish that those verbs were just on the screen all the time, instead of pulling up a menu every time I want to try giving something to somebody.
There's something in the remaster, and again, I didn't replay it this time, that allows you to cycle through them with buttons or with the mouse wheel or something to try and simplify that a little bit. But definitely, the combine. I remember there's in Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, which is a really good point-and-click adventure game by this same company. There's something, just hearing Indiana Jones just go I think I can combine these two items over and over again. They'll say, he or Guybrush will say things like that, or again, you'll get the opposite. Just, I can't combine those. He'll say something amusing when it happens. But you're right. There's a little bit of a clumsiness to this, and some games just did it a little more streamlined than others. And this one, even with the remaster, I think it suffers a little bit from being slightly clumsy. Sierra games use a different system where there's a hand icon, an eyeball, a pair of lips for talk to, and then your inventory or something. And sometimes there's a weird one for a game, there'll be a nose for smell object. I found the Sierra one to be a little bit smoother for that. It's fewer things to click on, fewer ways to interact with them, but I don't think it affected how good the puzzles were.
Yeah. So for an example of a kind of interaction, because what you're doing is you're trying to solve puzzles to get past barriers. Something's blocking you from going in somewhere, or something's blocking you from interacting with something. So we'll use those dogs as an example again. So in order to get past the dogs, you have to go find these special spicy flowers. You have to find some meat, put it in some stew, throw the flowers in the stew, then take it out. So you have this spiced meat, give the meat to the dogs, and then they, quote, fall asleep. I may be messing up exactly what that was, but that's the gist of it. So you get the idea of like sometimes you have this fairly complex string of interactions between items you pick up, things in the environment, because like you have to sneak into a kitchen to get access to the cook pot, stuff like that. So sometimes these got a little bit too complex for me to kind of suss out by myself. Like I figured out how to get the meat. I figured out how to, get the flowers. Combining the meat with the flowers isn't enough. You have to do it in the cook pot. And so like that extra step was sometimes just too much for me.
Yeah, everything in these games is ultimately a key and a lock of some kind. And sometimes it's obvious what you're supposed to do. More often than not, the experience is, like I said, kind of pushing against the edges and noticing, oh, the game lets me combine these two things.
Right.
But you may not know what you're going to use that new thing you've created for a while. So you just know, hey, I've made some progress by changing something in the world. And over time, by doing these enough, you'll kind of work your way through what some of these are. And it, again, the degree to which you need a guide to do that. You would never just look at the flowers and go, I know I'm going to use these to poison the dogs,
exactly.
Right? You're just going to note it. At some point, you're going to go, what happens if I combine the steak and the flowers? And it goes, I can't. And you go, well, I could cook the steak. Oh, it lets me cook the steak. Okay, interesting. Oh, I could throw other stuff in that pot. And you make incremental progress. It's not a lot of like, you're never going to look at one of the larger objectives you need to do and just immediately suss out all of the sub steps. You're mostly just knocking against these sub steps until your brain starts to notice, hey, there's a pattern here.
Yeah. And I want to point out also that it is kind of friendly in the way that like you can't really fuck yourself over by combining stuff that shouldn't be combined, or like, let's say you have that cook pot and you have that rubber chicken. It won't let you put the rubber chicken in the cook pot and like ruin the chicken or something like that. Guybrush will say, I don't think I should do that. So like you are right. When you get to one of those interactions that actually works, that means you're on the right path towards something.
Well, one thing to highlight about LucasArts games, and I obviously can't say all LucasArts games, but they're usually very, their designs are watertight where, like you said, you can't screw yourself out of an item you're going to need later to progress in the game. You can't like soft lock yourself, whatever, and you can't die either in this game. There's no interaction that will be fatal. Sierra games, famously, their slogan would be save early, save often, because part of the fun of those games is like they would have these wild, really imaginative like death animations and stuff, but there's no checkpointing other than the checkpoints you make. So if you don't want to lose too much progress before, and usually you'll have some inkling that this might be fatal. It's not like totally random that, oops, this random thing killed you, surprise. But still, you could you could find yourself in a very frustrating position. Legend of Corandia famously has this labyrinth that's very difficult to navigate, and you'd be saving a million times to try and work your way through it before you died, and then had to go even farther back to before you started the maze or wherever you last saved. The other thing that, like, I remember this in King's Quest V, there's an item that you need in like the final like eighth of the game that like you travel from one continent to another at some point. If you didn't pick up that item while you're in the first third to half of the game, when you get to the end of the game, you don't have the thing, and you would have to go really far back to undo that mistake. The better point-and-click adventure games would make it so that couldn't happen. Like if you were going to take the portal to the next island or whatever it might be, the character might say something like, I might have forgot something. They won't let you make that mistake. And Monkey Island is one of those games. There is nothing you can do to like make it so your progress is stunted in that way.
Yeah. So like to give an example, there's an early game puzzle where these two circus brothers want to shoot you out of a cannon, but they say you need a helmet first. and you're never going to find a helmet, but you'll find a bunch of objects where you're like, I wonder if I can put this on my head and use it as a helmet. So you'll go there, you'll take your objects there, you'll talk to them and say, hey, I think I can use this. And they're like, that's not a helmet. Come back when you have a helmet. And when you do actually bring something that they deem acceptable, then you've solved the puzzle. It's not like they're like, oh, okay, you want to try using a watermelon shell as a helmet? Cool. And then you die and you have to restart. Nothing like that happens in this game.
A Sierra game would absolutely do that. It would let you, but it would be part of the fun of like, just save before you do it. It was like, okay, get in the can, and then there'd be some funny death animation and some very funny text would pop up on the screen about how you died. And again, because of the way this is checkpointed, you just have to know of like, I should probably save my game before I shoot myself out of a cannon. Yeah. It's just a difference in design philosophy. And, that's why I think people tend to, over the long view of history, the LucasArts games have held up better and been more beloved because they don't have stuff like that.
Yeah. And it's also probably why, like, I think that I've had LucasArts games like this and the Indiana Jones games recommended to me more so than Sierra games, because, I mean, anyone who knows me and the way that I play games and the stuff that I enjoy, this type of design is definitely more my speed.
Yeah, like I said, this ride goes a little more smoothly for sure, for that reason.
It's not all smooth, though. I mentioned before that I needed a guide. There is a logic, and like we kind of have this phrase, adventure game logic. And if you've played these games and sometimes the solutions are not always obvious. Sometimes they seem random. Like, I'm trying to think. There's something you have to cook late in the game where all of the ingredients that you have to put in were not so obvious to me. And it's adventure game logic. They give you clues, but they're adventure game clues.
Right. This object, like you kind of used a good example, like, oh, well, maybe this could be used for a helmet, right? The game will never will rarely say, here is a helmet. And you go, finally, I have the helmet I need. Right. It's, now I've got a colander. And that's my helmet, right? Everything is one step removed logically. Yeah.
And so this adventure game logic gives me a lot of trouble. And I wonder, like, is there is meshing with adventure game logic born of experience, playing these games, like anything that you play when you're a kid and you have a lot of free time and you have a malleable brain, you may be able to like get in the groove a little bit easier than me when I'm 35 trying to play something that uses logic that's really different from other video games that I play,
I mean, it's like anything else. The more you do it, the better you get at it. I grew up playing a bunch of these. I'm sure these had an effect on the way my lateral thinking works that, I still rely upon today as an attorney of like, I might be able to combine this with other things. I can combine these two items.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think, as an adult, you might be your brain might be a little more rigid in its thinking. That's actually a good endorsement to play more of these, I think. But if you were to sit down and say like, now that I played Monkey Island, I guarantee you the next one you played, you'd probably have an easier time because all of these adventure games that like they use quote adventure game logic unquote like that. That's how they all kind of go. And so once you're kind of in that mode of like, okay, I get how this works now, you might have a slightly easier time with the next one. But I still tend to play these with a guide, and like I'll let myself fumble around up to a point, and I'll finally go like, all right, how do I make the thing? Just tell me what items I need, and then I'll get past it, and then I'll put the guide away for a while and go back to fumbling around. But yeah, you're right. I mean, this is a mode of logic that is by its nature, it's like Lewis Carroll logic more than it is Sherlock Holmes.
I had trouble putting away the guide in this because I would, let's say I probably played the first couple hours without a guide, kind of pushing around at the edges, making like, 3/4 progress on all the puzzles presented to me. And then I finally hit that wall where I'm like, okay, I have no idea. And when I hit that point, especially in this kind of game where I don't see the path forward, I don't want to spend an hour or like the next couple play sessions making zero progress whatsoever. So I'll open the guide up. I'm a big proponent of using guides and enjoying video games however you want to enjoy them. So this is a podcast that's very pro guide. But I'll open the guide, I'll find the solution. It's usually something like, back in that room, there was something under the table that I didn't click on. And so I go in, I click on that, I solve the puzzle. And then the next time I hit friction, the guide comes out faster and faster until I'm just following the guide. And I'm going through these steps, especially in like the last chapter in this game. I'm going through these steps and trying to imagine the situation where I'm not using the guide. I'm like, I would never have figured out this recipe puzzle. There's no fucking way, other than just brute forcing every item in my inventory, which is not a fun way to play, at least not for me. So if you have like the hands of steel when it comes to putting the guide down and keeping it closed until you absolutely need it, that's probably the best way to play. Just not the way that I could here.
Yeah, and when I was a kid, like I said, I would play these over a very long stretch of time in small increments. So, I would get to that spot you're talking about where I'm like, I feel like I've clicked on all the things. What more could I do? And I'd put it down and I'd go play something else and I'd do something else. And maybe in a week, I'd pop it back open and go like, hey, wait a minute, and wait for my brain to kind of turn over. So, I think these games kind of, play a game any way you want. I'm not here to tell you how you should or shouldn't do it. I would just say that I think the intended experience from the developers is to have a little bit of like, okay, I got to let my brain refresh. Maybe I'll come at this from a different angle. Or while I'm in the shower, I'll have a revelation of like, hey, wait a minute. Yeah. And then you go back to it. And so, yeah, there are games in here that it probably took me a year to complete by I'd only make these very slow, tiny incremental deductions once in a while. And if you like that or not, that's up to you to decide what you like.
We were on something about adventure game logic and how it gets easier as you go. And I noticed, because I'm playing Resident Evil, the remake of the original game, the one for the GameCube. And
yeah, it's there.
Adventure game logic is in Resident Evil. And I think I played Silent Hill 2 also, which is around that time period. Adventure game logic in that game with some of the puzzles as well. It's just a little bit less frequent than in Monkey Island. Again, I'm the guy that compares everything to the Boss Baby because I've only seen the Boss Baby before this. But this is there in other stuff that I play and enjoy. I just think it's a little bit less, and maybe because I have Monkey Island under my belt now, some of those things do go down a little bit easier. But some of the Resident Evil puzzles are more like, I found the top of a piece of sheet music, and then I found a book of sheet music. Well, I'll put those together, and it's a little bit less random,
Yeah, there is some of this, to be sure, in the Resident Evil series, but it is a lot more key and lock than it is rubber chicken and pulley system.
Yeah, but I mean, walking around and talking to everybody in the town was always a good time in this to for other things that you're doing. You're not always doing puzzles, but you are always exploring, talking to people, trying to figure out if there's something I need from this person, they're probably not going to give it to me. So how do I get this from them? Maybe I need to steal something or sneak somewhere where I'm not supposed to be. How do I do that in this very limited gameplay mode of just click on the place you want to walk to or click on the door you want to open? There's no stealth system or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, this game engine is not designed very well for other gameplay modes, right? There is one stealth section in this game, sort of. And you can feel that they're straining against the code to make that happen. It's not meant for that. There are other point and click adventure games that do incorporate different types of things into them. And some to greater degrees of success or lesser degrees. But you're never going to get much of a first person shooting section into one of these or, Street Fighter style combat or whatever. That doesn't happen. But I think the better ones do have some degree of inventiveness in terms of going, well, we got to give you something other to do once in a while than just the straight pointing and clicking. And so we'll get to some of there's one, I think, great part of this game that's a cool innovation that finds a way to use this to do something different.
Also mention, I guess, if people are listening and don't know about the game, it is a pirate game. There's a quest centered around finding a sword and defeating a sword master, but there is no combat. You'll get into combat situations from time to time, but they are not combat. It's dialogue combat.
This is what I was alluding to before. Yeah, the insult sword fighting,
which is fantastic and another example of great humor.
This is like, you talk about necessity as the mother of invention, of going like, well, we don't really want to have a fencing simulator in this game, but we still want you to have this swashbuckling pirate experience. And this solution of basically, you're not trading blows, you're trading insults with the other pirates and gathering up. Basically what you're doing is you're grinding, you're learning as you duel and fail over and over again. You're learning all of the setups and you're learning all of the punchlines to then use. And this was so much fun. It's in, I don't have a good memory of 2, but I bet it's in there, but it's definitely in 3 and 4. I think they bring this back in every iteration of Monkey Island because now it's kind of a signature thing in the series.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fun. It's fun to grind for new insults, and it's fun to get into those battles and try and, pick the right response for what someone says and stuff like that.
Yeah. So yeah, that's an example of like, we're going to use our adventure game tool set to do something that's a little just different of a gameplay mode.
Yeah. So I guess just to wrap up gameplay and give some final thoughts here about The Secret of Monkey Island before we get into spoilers. Doug, if you have any wrap-up thoughts, but also answer the question, who would you recommend The Secret of Monkey Island to?
Oh, I'd recommend The Secret of Monkey Island to anybody. I mean, that's part of the charm of a game like this, is that no matter what type of game is your type of game, you can play this. If you're the type of person that's like, my meat thumbs can't play a Souls game. I can't make Mario, jump on what I want him to jump on. Like I said, this is nothing but your brain and how much fun you want to have fumbling around, having silly things happen to you. So this game is, like I said, it's G-rated. There's literally I can't think of a person on earth who couldn't pick up this game and potentially have some fun. How far you want to get into the game depends on, again, really just how much do you want to deny yourself the guide. So
right.
That's the only limiter of like, well, if I want to do it without the guide, yeah, this will take you a while. You'll probably get there eventually anyway. But, there's a reason this game has had the legacy that it's had. I will say, if you're really thinking about, I want to go play a point and click adventure game, this is not, you don't have to start here. There are better point and click adventure games in this. It is just the foundational one. And so you will see echoes of this in every other one that comes after it. But yeah, I'd recommend this to anybody.
Yeah, I kind of agree. And that's why, like, when we talked about games for you to come on the show and talk about, we talked about other point and click games, but I kind of just gravitated toward the foundational one, which is partly because like I do want to go back and see, the foundation. I also have that weird brain worm that tells me, well, if I'm going to get into a series, I got to start with the first one. And it's really hard to talk me out of that. So that's why we're here. But
yeah, and I'd also say, by the way, if you do think, hey, maybe I'll pick Monkey Island 2, 3, 4, one of the others, the plot is irrelevant. They will start you off with everything you need to know. It's, you do not need to play any other entry in the series in order.
Yeah, good to know. And I'm glad that even if the plot is irrelevant, I'm glad I started with this one, despite, misgivings about, not misgivings, kind of poor experiences with the gameplay and basically devolving into, if I had a second monitor, the guide would have been up on the second monitor. It would have been one of those. But I did enjoy the writing enough. I enjoyed the situations, and, the guide removed the friction of the puzzles for me, but it didn't take away what I think is the best part of the game, which is the writing and the jokes and the characters and the voices. That is what I'm glad I experienced here. The gameplay, I can take it or leave it. And, as I play more of these, maybe I'll get into the groove a little bit more, but I am glad that I played this, got to know all the characters, enjoyed the jokes, stuff like that. So I recommend this to people like me who didn't play point and click adventures. Give this one a shot. It's funny. It's interesting. Don't be shy about using a guide. other people, I guess, like if maybe you're not super interested in like point and clicks, but you like to go back in the history of video games and play influential titles, this is one of those. So recommended to people like that, as a curiosity if you want to play stuff from gaming history. Because like you said, the stuff from this game, the tone, the writing, the interactions that you have with the environment, with items and stuff, is seen in a lot of other stuff.
Absolutely.
So before we get into the spoilers section, we will give you the chance to shill Nostalgium Arcanum however you want to shill it. Where can people find you?
You can find our podcast wherever you find podcasts. It's just Nostalgium, not Nostalgia, but Nostalgium Arcanum. And just look for that. We're on Twitter, and for now, even though I'd like to find a nice lifeboat, not sure which is the correct one, but Twitter gets worse every day, and as our planet spirals out of control. But it's still on Twitter for now at Nostalgium Pod, and we're also on Instagram there, which is where I tell people to follow us, mostly because one, Twitter is dying, and two, I'll post bonus stuff for episodes on there, different just things, extra video content, things like that. And that's really it. That's the only place to find me. Oh, if you want to find me personally, my handle for now is at Human J Sherman, because that's how I look, and that's just the hand God has dealt me, that I am sort of I am John Lovitzy. So there you go.
Awesome. Yeah. If people want a place to start with Nostalgium Arcanum, again, I guested on an episode talking about Pokemon.
So since this is a game-based podcast, we've done a few game episodes.
Right,
so if you're curious, that might be a place to start. We've done, let's see, what games have we done? We did Street Fighter 2, we did Myst. We're recording one on Doom tonight. That'll probably be out by the time you hear this.
Yep. Final Fantasy 6.
Chrono Trigger with your friend Matt Storm was on that one. A few game-based ones, in addition to lots of movies and TV shows I'm sure you all have heard of. So that's where I'd recommend you start, though.
Awesome. Yeah, and again, recommend the pod. Check down in the show notes for links. And also down in the show notes, you'll find a link to join the Discord server for Tales from the Backlog and my other show, A Top 3 Podcast. Our Discord community is wonderful. We would love to have you join. We have a great group of people come in and talk about games. If you want to come in and talk about Monkey Island, this is the week to do it. But we have tons of channels, lots of good discussion going on in there. If you would like to support the show, the best things to do are to leave a rating and review if your podcatcher allows it. That's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Addict, and probably some others that I don't use allow that as well. If you want to support monetarily, patreon.com/realdavejackson is the place to do it. All patrons get bonus episodes. You can vote on polls for games to appear on the show. You can also get my, not nostalgia, my retro series called Tales from the Way Backlog at the $5 per month level. This game won actually an informal poll that I held in the Discord server, where I was like, I want to play one of two games. Should I play the old one or the one that was inspired by it that came out last year? And this one won. The other option was, what is it? Curse of the Golden Idol, which is a kind of modern point and click, which I still want to play. So maybe that'll be on the show sometime. Yeah. So Doug and I are going to take a break, and when we come back, full spoilers for The Secret of Monkey Island.
Trademark.
Okay, Doug and I are back, and it's time to talk spoilers for The Secret of Monkey Island. We're going to break the spoiler section down in the chronological chapters. There are 3 of them. We're not going to walk through the game. As Doug said in the break, between these sections, that would just be us reading through a game facts guide, and no one wants to listen to that. So we're just going to talk about stuff that's memorable. So I'll kick it to you first. What is something from part 1, the 3 trials, that you thought stood out?
Well, we already talked about the sword insult combat.
Yeah.
And that's really it's mostly isolated to this chapter of the game. I think that's a little bit of a problem in that, like, this should have come back at the climax somehow. And later games, I believe, do that because it's the only combat-like mechanic you have. You would want it to be a climactic moment to the game. But there's a lot of funny things from this part, but like even just the opening is great. Like you walk out onto this like bluff, and there's a guy standing there, and you don't even know where you came from. He just walks into the screen. We don't know what Guybrush was doing prior to entering this game. Yeah. And he just basically announces, I'm Guybrush Threepwood, and I want to be a mighty pirate. Right? That like line gets memed to death. And there's just this old man sitting by a fire who's basically like, who are you and what are you doing here? Why do I care that you want to be a pirate? And just that opening alone, it just kind of tells you like you're immediately greeted with what the tone of this game will be.
Yeah.
Because like they're already like breaking the fourth wall and taking the piss out of your character, who is, he does look like, he needs a wedgie. Even more so in the original pixelated version. He looks kind of doofy, and he becomes endearing over time. But yeah, like the game doesn't even tell you like, who are you? What are you doing here? This like very loose goal of, I want to be a pirate. Why? I don't know. It's an adventure game, and you need an objective. That's why. Yeah. Now go do. So that stood out to me looking back at it this time. And then just the game opens. The first thing you do is they have you walk through a couple of screens. They give you a very small number of things to click on and get get your sea legs, pun intended. And then you walk into the scum bar where things start to kind of expand.
Is interesting with that that old guy on top of the cliff. Like part of my experience with just media in general tells me that, that old guy is going to be my mentor or something like that.
Or the villain or something.
Or the villain. Yeah. But no, he's just a dude on top of the cliff. He's just chilling.
Yeah. Not clear what he's there to do, why he's there. Yeah. He's literally just there to like basically break you down a little bit for whatever you say to him.
Yeah. I will say, you mentioned the insults. There is a kind of like insult combat thing during the final boss fight. In the chapel, it's not the sort of. I don't think you can lose it. That's the thing about that final thing.
No, I don't think it doesn't have the same rhythm that this does, where you're literally trying to solve a puzzle of like what's the best punchline for that setup. Yeah,
exactly.
But later games do that, I believe.
That's good. That was a really memorable part. So like you trying to like find the sword master. It's a whole thing to find the sword master's house. You have to go get trained before you can find the sword master. So like that's a weird fun scene where you're talking with this guy. He has this elaborate like training dummy. He talks about sword fighting like it's sex or something like that, kind of maybe the most adult thing in the game is just some little light innuendo when it comes to talking about sword fighting. But in order to get to the sword master's house, first you have to grind, and you get into these sword fights and someone will insult you and you have a big list of responses. So someone will say like, oh, I can't believe your smell or something like that. And the correct response will be like, well, that's what happens when you open your mouth. And if you say the right thing, then you advance. And if you say the wrong thing, they advance. And by just getting into these combats, you kind of absorb. You're like a blue mage in Final Fantasy. You absorb these insults to use in further battles.
Right. So what'll happen is you won't know really any insults at the top. You'll hear someone insult you. The next time you use that insult against another pirate, he will know the correct punchline most of the time and will say it. Now that punchline goes into your dialogue options. So the next time you can say it, but you just sort of do this over and over again until your library of insults and responses gets bigger. What I like about it is when you do finally confront the sword master, you're using the same setups and punchlines, but to new jokes. So they have to write the punchline as a punchline that works for two different potential setups, because she'll say an insult to you you've never heard before, but you'll go through the list and go like, hey, this works. I'll say that back to her. Mm-hmm. And it does. And like, that's really satisfying. I think that's why this system kind of works well, because they fold that last little final exam, quote unquote, to the end of it.
Yeah. The process of gathering insults and responses is exactly like how maybe you'll hear your friend use a new curse word when you're a little kid, and you're like, I'm going to remember that. I'm going to use that. And then, you'll use it. Someone will react to it. And it's just really fun. Another fun thing about that is when you have enough responses to go fight the Swordmaster, the pirates will just tell you. It's another fourth wall break. They'll be like, oh, you're good enough to go fight the Swordmaster. And you're like, oh, okay, time to move on. Finding the Swordmaster was a real pain in the ass, though, because you have to trick this old shopkeeper into leaving, and then you have to follow him, but you have to be like right on his. It's not like a tailing mission where you have to like hang back because he'll lose you. You have to follow like right behind him. He won't notice that you're there.
Yeah, you do have to go fairly fast to follow that. And there's an area of the forest that's like a Lost Woods kind of maze where you can just kind of get lost forever. So he's the only one who will follow the path you need. And it's not one of these things where like a savvy user can like, oh, I'll break the game. Next time I won't even bother with Swordmaster. I'll just follow that path. It won't work. You have to follow him. And this was confusing. Getting him to leave is not that hard, but making the deduction of like, I better follow him. That's the deduction I think is harder to recognize. Like, oh, I wouldn't think this game operates that way.
And it's kind of a pain in the ass how if you fail, you have to go all the way back because you're going to be in the woods when you fail. Probably you have to go all the way back to town, go back to his shop, get him to leave again. You have to go through the dialogue. He'll scold you for tricking him. You have to do that thing again. And so it was a process of like, oh, he left. What do I do? And then you'll get the idea, oh, maybe I should follow him. But this is like, maybe it's like Assassin's Creed and I have to hang back while I follow him so he doesn't see me. And that doesn't work. So you have to repeat this, but every time you repeat it, it's like a couple minutes of walking across the map, going through various doors. It gets to be annoying, but sooner or later it's over.
A lot of point-and-click adventure games feature some kind of a maze, and I've yet to see a good one. They're all kind of varying levels of like shitty. This was a little bit of a wall for me. I remember when I went through this. You have here on the notes of like, oh, what were the specific puzzles that were difficult to figure out? They're all kind of difficult to figure out, and they're all because you're kind of doing all of them at the same time.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely anything with a maze and is usually tough. There's some that are fun though. Like there's a joke they repeat in terms of a puzzle where, like to start this, I think you get there's a guy who says, "I'll give you the map to the Swordmaster's house," and he ends up giving you like dancing instructions. It's like, oh, one step forward, 2 steps back, and the deduction is, oh, okay, it is dancing instructions, but it's also what you have to do in the forest to get to somewhere you want to be, right? Mm. And they do that again later on with the recipe, where it's like, oh, this isn't what I want; it's a recipe, but like, nope, that is actually the thing, right? They like that. That is very classic adventure game logic.
Yeah. There was we mentioned the poodles in front of the governor's mansion, but when you're inside the mansion, I thought this was a really fun scene. There's not a whole lot of like interaction that goes on inside the mansion. Instead, you like go through a door and there's this whole elaborate thing that plays out off screen where like you get into a big tussle. But what makes it stand out is that it's still using adventure game verbs and items. So like when you use something, it'll show a text thing at the bottom of the screen that says use whatever on whatever, right? But then you have this elaborate sequence of these happening off screen, but they're all things that are not part of your normal.
They're not in your inventory. Yeah, it makes no sense.
So it's like it'll just pop out. It'll say use nail file on rhinoceros toe, and there's cartoon bangs and booms happening and stuff, and it's very, again, Weird Al humor, but the way that they portray it by just there's a scuffle going on, you hear that, but it's all playing out in your little text action thing, like your log basically is really, really fun. Fits the game.
Yeah, it's a way of playing with the medium, right? And the way they deliver jokes to you. And then I believe right after that is where you do meet Governor Elaine Marley, who you've been hearing about. I don't think they even say she's a girl at first. I think they just say Governor Marley.
Right.
And then you meet Elaine Marley, who's sort of this mini driver type character.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, way more swashbuckly and like clearly the one who wears the pants and is the more competent between her and Guybrush as the series goes on. Not as much of that here. And we meet LeChuck, who they've also been like heralding, like, you know, people are, when you meet people, they'll talk about this guy who is this very terrifying pirate who went off to find the secret of Monkey Island and never came back, and is now a ghost. And I think he went because he was in love with Marley, and so he just said, "I'm going to impress you by finding the secret of Monkey Island." So he's got this like ridiculous crush on her, and I just love how he's rendered. He's this blue glowing sprite, and they play with this in each subsequent thing. So here he's the ghost pirate LeChuck. In the sequel, he's the zombie pirate LeChuck. He's somehow been resurrected as like this green, like dripping corpse. And then in the third one, he's the demon pirate LeChuck, and he has this like beard of fire. And I think in the fourth one, he cycles between all three. And like, again, I don't know if this sounds dumb to your audience, but the point is that it's just like, yeah, we're going over the top with this. Think, Jeffrey Rush from Pirates, but even sillier.
Mm-hmm. And that explains why he eventually kidnaps the governor, and the kind of thing that will help you finish part 1 and move on to part 2 is you have to get a ship. Also interesting how, like, unexpected to me, but kind of makes sense that initial plot thing of the 3 trials to become a pirate is out the window. Like, as soon as you're done with them, the pirates are gone. Now you're moving on to other things, and it's never a thing again.
It's very much an adventure game, especially this style of adventure game, where it's all comedy, that it's just like, you did these amazing trials and everything is this anticlimax of just like, oh, well, great. Here's your certificate. Great. Thanks. Now you're a pirate, whatever they do. And all of the pirates you meet, especially in this early section in the bar, they're so great for the world building of like that. You come in there expecting, something along the lines of more realism from these pirates, or like, that kind of a tone. And then immediately they're just like, nope, they're all cartoons. They're all very silly. The governance of this island by this pirate council. It's a lot of the, like, picture the joke from Pirates of the Caribbean where they're like, well, they're more like guidelines, really. Like that is that joke over this entire game.
Yeah. I remember going in and, just you see a bunch of mean looking pirates sitting at the table and you're like, well, they're not going to help Guybrush. And you go up and talk to them and you're like, yeah, sure. You want to become a pirate? Here's the things you have. And it's part of like this, it's part of also like, yeah, sure, kid, you want to be a pirate? Go do these 3 impossible tasks and then come back. But they're not like mean to you or anything like that. So yeah, those pirates are fun. Speaking of fun, this is when you start to deal with Stan, when you have to find a ship to go find Monkey Island. And if there's anything that I remember from this game, it's going to be it's going to be Stan and me walking around my house doing the Stan voice to my dog and stuff like that.
Yeah. Like we said, he is this 80s used car salesman. The design on his jacket is really fun. So he's got this like bright plaid design that doesn't move with his body. It's just like the background is plaid and he kind of moves in front of it. It's very hard to describe in words what's happening visually. This is an artifact of like, they did this with pixel art and they couldn't do anything so complicated, but they really needed that plaid for the joke. That was just had to be in there. Every subsequent iteration of Monkey Island, no matter how good the tech, still does this with Stan's jacket. So like even in like 3D or, in the fully animated third one. So it's just, this is a part of this character, is this absurd jacket and his arm movements, which literally it's like he's punching in random directions all the time.
He's one of those inflatable things outside of the car dealership with the arms waving around in the wind. Yeah. So he's great. You get into this bargaining thing with Stan to get a ship, and it's Stan's used ship emporium, I think it's called. So which is funny. You know who wants a lightly used ship, and he's got a bunch of ships that are in disrepair around the.
Some of them
are
like half sunk in the water.
Exactly. Yeah. But you have to haggle with him to get this ship. It's another puzzle that I had trouble with because he's an effective salesman, and part of the way you have to solve it is he gives you all these like add-ons, basically. There's like, you want the window defoggers and stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't know. That sounds all right. But you have to say no to everything. And then you, in classic like used car fashion, in order to get the best price, you have to threaten to leave and all of that stuff, which I did suss that out. My experience haggling in Asia taught me to leave to get a better price. But this was a kind of fun puzzle. One I needed the guide to ultimately solve, but like dealing with Stan is fun.
His writing is some of the best because every up thing he tries to upsell you on is funny. He'll tell you all these anecdotes about, the little old lady who used to pilot the ship around or whatever. Like all the like just classic punchlines for a used car salesman they do, and they do it really well. Mm-hmm. The other thing we should mention, so you spend some time before you even get here dealing with this sheriff on the island who turns out to be LeChuck in disguise.
Yeah.
He's constantly throwing you in jail and stuff. The only thing that this is where a little bit of the voice acting hurts the game because in text you have no inkling that this is in fact LeChuck.
Oh, right.
In voice, you're like, that sure sounds a lot. Yeah, it's the same voice actor. It sure sounds a lot. There's only so many pirate voices this guy can do.
Yeah.
So that hurts it a little bit. But yeah, all of the guy in jail that you have to bust out is very funny.
The joke. The joke about grog and how grog is like just the most caustic substance out there, but all the pirates are just downing it in the bar. Everyone who lives on this island, all the natives, they're all about it. It's what they drink.
You spent a lot of time. Yeah, you spent a lot of time on Melee Island. This is the longest part of the game.
Yeah, But the idea that that grog is this caustic thing. There's a puzzle to get the guy out of the jail, which is what reminded me, where you have to steal a cup from the bar and run from the bar over to the jail, and it will
eat through the cup.
Eat through the cup, and so you have to do it quickly. And I think you have to like transfer it to a new cup at some point.
Yeah, you have to get 2 cups because it won't survive the journey. So you have to transfer it to a new cup so it'll make it all the way to the where the prison is.
Yeah, so that's just endlessly funny. Every joke that involves grog, including in the last chapter, there's another one, is good.
Yeah, 100%. So we get a boat from Stan after enough haggling with pieces of 8.
Yeah,
and you have your piratey crew of the swordmaster, the guy you sprung from prison, and who's the other guy? The chef? I forget.
There's a guy in this house on this island that has like a deadly creature in a closet or something.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you stick your hand in there, and you can't believe you did it. And it's like what is it? A chihuahua,
just a
chicken,
bird.
or something? Bird, yeah. Something innocuous.
Right. So that's part of your crew, and in part 2, it's a great joke that like you hire like a prisoner, you hire this like big buff pirate, you hire the swordmaster, and then as soon as you get out on the journey, all of your crew is like, nah, we're just sunbathing. We're not really interested in helping anymore.
Yeah, it's an instant mutiny.
Yeah. Which, to be fair, Guybrush, not the most inspiring pirate leader, either through motivation or fear.
And he never will be throughout any of the sequels.
This is a really short chapter, though, part 2. It's really just trying to find Monkey Island and then get to it. So there's 2 big puzzles. You have to make this concoction that basically knocks you out so that you kind of hallucinate your way to Monkey Island, something like that. There's some supernatural thing happening.
Yeah, you have to somehow, like, you can't be found while you're trying to find it or something like that. It's you need to knock yourself out. I forget what you used to do it, but the other thing is you make 2 recipes. You make the knockout recipe, and then you make the recipe for blowing yourself out of the cannon to get from the ship to Monkey Island.
Yeah, so this is a really tough puzzle for me. I had to use the guide. So I have the recipe here. This is the one that makes the fume that knocks you out and then magically takes the ship to Monkey Island. So the recipe is 4 leaves of mint, 1 human skull pressed, 1 squirt of squid ink, 2 pints of monkey blood, 1 live chicken, and 3 ounces of brimstone. So what you actually have is you have some breath mints. The pressed skull is a Jolly Roger flag, which, I mean, I guess you could have figured that out. Squid ink, you have a bottle of ink. Monkey blood, you have a bottle of wine that you use for that, which I wouldn't have gotten that. One live chicken, you have the rubber chicken with the pulley, and then brimstone, you have gunpowder. So like there was just a couple of these where like the leap of logic that monkey blood means wine and not something that I didn't already have, stuff like that. This is the kind of thing where I'm like, maybe I would have bashed my head on it and just like brute forced everything, but I'm glad I had the guide for this.
Yeah, part of that is also like how curious are you about seeing all of the jokes in the game? Because there would be a time where maybe I would have gone into my inventory and used the examine tool to look at everything. Because anything you look at, you don't just look at it. Like Guybrush will say something about what it is. Mm-hmm. So I don't remember if this is the case, but if you look at the wine, it might say like, Monkey Vineyards or something. There might be something like that gives it away. But but you would need the impetus to do it, because otherwise you're like, well, I know it's a bottle of wine. I don't need to click look at wine.
Exactly.
So that's the kind of thing where like having that kid brain and going like, I wonder if he does something funny when I do this. Sometimes that yields the solutions.
Yeah. The other puzzle to get off the ship is like this sequence of events to shoot yourself out of the cannon again. And I like that the joke of Guybrush shooting himself out of cannons gets brought back after chapter 1, but the sequence of events and timing that you have to do them in to shoot yourself out of the cannon was really frustrating because it's a very short timer. And so it would have been a thing. And again, it's one of those where when you fail, you have to go back down under the ship, get more fire, I think it is, something that's on fire, bring it back out, try again, probably fail because you don't know the exact sequence of things you have to do, go back, pick it up again, straight to the guide.
I can't argue with that. It's some of these things are on shorter timers, and better point-and-click adventure games would either give you more time or they would make it a little easier to just restart the fire. It's just kind of, again, a victim, I think, of being early on in this genre.
Yeah.
It's not perfect.
Yeah, I mean, not really not looking for an argument per se or a defense of anything. It's just kind of like, this kind of sucked, and it's one of the two big halves of this chapter.
Yeah, it is a very short chapter. Everything mostly goes a little quicker once you get off of Melee Island.
Yeah, I would say Melee Island was, if I played this game for 6 hours, Melee Island was maybe like 3.5, and then a half hour for this chapter, and then 2 for the last chapter, basically.
Right.
So part 3, you go to Monkey Island, and you're trying to find LeChuck's hideout. And this is it's actually like bigger than Melee Island, bigger map to explore, probably a similar or slightly more places, like locations to go walk around and find stuff in. And this is the part where there are places you need to go to that are not marked, where it's like, oh, you need to go to the crossing of these 2 rivers. But there's nothing on the map other than a crossing of 2 rivers. There's not sometimes they'll put a dot that says, this is a place you can go to, but not for that. So like, that's where like this pixel hunting came in.
Yeah. And again, I don't know for sure if it's a little easier to do the pixel hunting on the 640 by 480, original version of it. But you're right. This island is a little bigger. It's a little harder to explore. And I think they want to give you that sense of, what they've been building to, which is this is an island that nobody comes back from, alive. And it's full of mystery. And of course, the trademarked secret of Monkey Island, which they never reveal
right.
What the secret actually is. I think maybe in the 4th game, there's something that happens on the island you could call that. Maybe that was the secret, but that's part of the joke. It's just there is no secret of Monkey Island.
Yeah, I thought that maybe the secret of Monkey Island is how to get to Monkey Island, because that's you can't just sail there. Yeah, you have to get this fucking magic spell concocted to get there. But anyway, Monkey Island's also notably dangerous because of the cannibals that are there, and these are some memorable characters. There's also a pirate, like a lost shipwrecked pirate on there.
Herman Toothrot.
Yeah, which is a great name for a pirate.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's the classic crazy old hermit character.
Yeah.
He's been stranded on this island for 20 some odd years. I believe it's revealed in a subsequent game this is Elaine's father. So he's been, his mind is totally gone. And he talks all about his like missing partner who he was stranded with.
Yeah.
Because now he can't leave the island because it takes at least 2 people to operate a ship to get off of the island. So he's been there forever. And you're constantly running into him. And he's like, you're mostly just like in his hair, like, hey, that's my, whatever, leave it alone. But he is very funny. Like I like that character a lot.
And I like how he's kind of like this down on his luck character. Even when you offer to help him, he's still like, when you leave the island, he gets left behind. Just everything kind of leaves him behind. That kind of butt of all those jokes, He also has like a feud with the local cannibals. This is a funny joke that I remembered, that he lent them his banana picker. And I'm like, okay, what the fuck? What's a banana picker? And when you actually find it, it's a giant set of hands, like a contraption with just a cartoonishly big set of hands to reach up and pull bananas down or something like that. And it's in a room that's too small to get it out,
Yeah, all of this stuff works. The monkeys are, they're wandering all over the island, sort of like the sword fighting pirates were on the first island. And so you have to like befriend the monkeys by giving them bananas, which is why you need the banana picker. You have to rearrange this like bunch of rocks on kind of a seesaw to make them fling these rocks into places you need them to go to block the river, to then create a dam that'll allow you to access another point. It's a lot of wandering all over the island to do these things. You're eventually captured by the cannibals, and I love that you just walk out. It's not really much of a jail.
The cannibals kind of look at you, even though there's one other person on the island. They kind of look at you and they're like, you just like, our nutritionist told us that like you're not going to be good for us, so we're going to let you go. You're not useful in that way. So yeah.
Yeah, they're dieting cannibals, I guess. And they've all got these ridiculous heads on. Like there's like kind of like a stereotypical cultural appropriation mask you could expect, but that's not what they're wearing. They're wearing like one guy looks like a giant lemon for a head or something. Like they're all,
I think his name's Lemonhead. Yeah,
like they're just they're so cartoony as to like avoid stereotypes.
It kind of like, we're not going to make this like a caricature of one culture, so we're just going to have a bunch of stereotypes in here, and then also they have weird personalities that you would not expect. They're not like barbarians or something like that. They're all like very intelligent. Yeah.
They're always playing against type. Like that's big for these games.
Yeah.
A lot of them where they will do that, where they have their characters that are like, we're going to show you a trope, but we're going to do something so different with the trope that, it's more fun than just like, oh, okay, some more cannibals in a Caribbean pirate type movie. Like, no, that's not what they are. These are not the guys who like chased Johnny Depp in the second one and are going to cook him. Like they're much sillier than that.
There's a couple of these. I think it's one of these cannibals, maybe one other character in the game that had like that old school stereotypical gay voice. You know what I mean? Like the big gay Al voice from South Park, which when I heard that, I was like, oh yeah, that used to be a thing. That's gone out of style now.
Yep. That's 2009 or whenever this came out. Like that would have been more accepted for sure.
2009, but also, well, I guess the original game didn't have voice acting, as you said.
Correct. So yeah, the characterization for these were all in the text, which mostly, like I said, if you take the voice acting out, the jokes are still funny. Like they still work. Yeah,
for sure.
So yeah, credit to that writing.
Yeah. This island part I thought was first annoying with the amount of like crisscrossing and backtracking you have to do from Cannibal to beach to other location back to Cannibal Village. Yada, yada, yada. Eventually the game gets to a point where they start skipping that and they start saying like a long walk later in a loading screen. And then later it'll be like a long walk, a brief row, and a short hike later. And it skips all of that backtracking in a kind of, again, self-aware way that this game kind of works in.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, this game has been self-aware from the first screen.
Yeah.
So, that's very in keeping of having the narrator just go yada yada yada. You trekked across the island.
Yeah.
Until you open up the giant monkey head by using a giant Q-tip to clean out its ear.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, very on brand for this game's sense of humor. It's also like, I thought there was a fun joke where you pick up like this fake totem to trade to the cannibals in order to, like, I think it's to get the banana picker back or something like that.
Well, you steal the totem somehow from, I think, in front of the monkey. You're giving them back their own totem. Yeah,
you're giving it back to the cannibals, but it was made by the cannibals, but like the one who made it is too dumb to recognize his own work, even though his name is on it. So,
right.
Yeah. Fun joke.
Yeah. Again, very, very Monty Python, very Mel Brooks, like Spaceballs kind of stuff.
Yeah. Is there anything else about the island section before we kind of get to the part where we start dealing with LeChuck and the pirates?
Yeah, I just think I love the severed head that you get from them, because they basically tell you, like, you can't navigate there's this like lava cave under the monkey head that leads to where LeChuck has stationed his ship.
Yeah,
and they tell you, oh, you can't. Now you'll get lost, and it's just like the forest in the first part of the game. Like, you can't navigate this without help. Right. And so eventually you get this, this really weird looking severed head of a navigator, and you hold it out in front of you when you're in the maze, and it will like look around and it'll hove in on like one of the exits to the room, and that's the one you need to go in. But I love the voice of that head. Like, it's just the delivery of everything he does is great. And then eventually he has an argument with Guybrush about, like, well, why do I need to help you? And then he's like, I think I have the leverage here. I'm just going to throw you in the lava. It's like, well, then you'll get lost. Like, okay, well, then you'll be lost too. And he's like, oh, okay. The logic of how he, like, Guybrush sort of talks the head into helping him is very funny.
There was also a part in that convincing where, like, it kind of devolves into Guybrush saying, please, and the head's like, no. And he's like, pretty please. And you go through that whole pretty please with a cherry on top.
Yeah, well, you see that stuff in your, like, because when you have any dialogue, you'll usually have like at least 4 possible things you can say. There's never, quote unquote, a wrong thing to say, because eventually you'll get to where you need to go anyway. But like, it's one of those things where like some of them will cycle forever. So you might go like, please, pretty please with sugar on top, a couple more, and then it'll go back to please, pretty. But this isn't one of those. This is one where you do just, the solution to the puzzle is just beg him until you wear this thing down.
Yeah. So eventually you get to find the pirate ship, and before you can confront LeChuck, there's a stealth section on the pirate ship. Earlier in the game, there was like very light stealth. There's one where you have to sneak into the kitchen of the bar, and then there's one where you can trick the owner of the shop to leave because you have to steal something from his safe. But this is like an extended stealth thing, and one of those ones where if you fuck up, they kick you off the ship and you have to go back in. Not that it's like a giant deal to go back in, but stealth section in a non-stealth game again.
Yeah, you have to turn yourself invisible. Is the trick to it, and with some magical whatever it is, and you sneak around the ship. You're trying to figure out where Governor Marley is hidden on the ship. You need to open certain gates. You need to get past various ghost pirates without alerting them. You need to steal stuff, but you're mostly looking for this root that the cannibals say they can use to make a potion that destroys ghosts. It's the MacGuffin that you need. They might as well call it like the antagonist eliminator. Yeah.
This is a funny part in the boat where you have to get something from a sleeping pirate, and in order to, it's actually a jar of grog, actually, like ghost grog, I think. Right. You have to tickle his feet with a ghost feather that you get from a ghost chicken. You use the ghost grog to like melt the lock off of a treasure chest, which is, I think that's where you get the root actually. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you get that root, and LeChuck's not there. They've gone to the church to do a wedding. And this is where you get into that final war of words with LeChuck, and you'll trade insults, but they're all insults that end with like blankosity. So he'll say like, I can't believe your atrocity. I can't believe your felicity. I can't believe your validity. And goes
none of
back
them
and
even
forth.
make sense after a while.
No,
like those words don't mean anything.
Which is funny. It's part of the joke that like you're just saying words that end with, CITY.
But although I will say before we even get to that, you do. So we've been meeting this like LeChuck's second in command, who's this cute little skeleton voiced by another Rob Paulson voice, and he turns out to be Toothrot's missing partner.
Oh right,
like he died and I guess got a new job working for LeChuck. But he's just very sweet and funny. Because that's like when LeChuck's not around, like all of the ghost like skeleton pirates are also kind of cute and nice.
Yeah, they're chilling basically. I thought that what happens after the final confrontation with LeChuck is really good, really funny. So you actually get into a fight with him, and he punches you, and he'll punch you up into the air, and you'll like fly up, and so you'll see the map screen like you're that high up in the air, cartoonishly. And you'll land at all the locations around the island. And this will just continue infinitely until you figure out how to beat him. And it took me a while. So Guybrush got knocked around for a while in my game.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's one of those things where like, we're not going to let you fail this, right? The software is like, we know, right. You're here at this point. And so you might have to repeat certain things, but you're never going to fail it. It's just a matter of you waiting until you figure out how to deliver the antagonist eliminating ghost killing spray to LeChuck to get rid of him.
Yeah, isn't it root beer? That's what.
Yeah, you put the root inside root beer because there's this you when you land you're at stands
and you land in a vending machine.
Right, there's a vending machine right there. So you take the root beer, you put the root in the root beer, and you shake it up, and you spray him with it, and that is the end of LeChuck. And you and Governor Marley can finally be together.
Yeah. Also of note, what's his name? LeChuck lands in Stan's emporium, and Stan tries to sell him a ship, and LeChuck punches him up into the air, which is really funny.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, this game has a very consistent tone from beginning to end, and that tone is not too far off from Warner Brothers cartoons.
Yeah, Stan will sell a used ship to anybody, or he'll try to.
Yeah.
So
even the Dread Pirate LeChuck.
Yeah. So that is the end of The Secret of Monkey Island. Is there anything else that we wanted to get into before finishing up?
I don't think so. I mean, as we sort of said, like there's barely a story here. It's, Guybrush wants to be a pirate. He finds out Elaine gets kidnapped. He goes to rescue Elaine, and then he does.
Yeah.
No real intrigue.
Yeah, just memorable moments and jokes along the way, and some frustrations.
Yeah, I mean, as we sort of said before, like trying to recount the plot of this game does a disservice to what it is, because it is just sketches. It is just these memorable encounters you have with, whether it's with like the circus duo, or with Herman or the cannibals, or any of your mutinous crew. Anyone you meet along the way, it's just an excuse for these writers to shine. And because they so often do, like that's what makes the experience go down so well. Yeah.
And that's why I ended up, I mean, I have a positive memory of this game. I finished it 3-4 weeks ago now. And this game lives in my memory as a positive experience, despite really having trouble with the gameplay, because the writing and the jokes and the situations are so strong, fun, memorable, good adjectives,
Yeah, and they maintain that quality definitely in the second one, which is the same team. And believe it or not, I think that even though Monkey Island 3 and 4 are a different writing team, the tone is so well established that I think those games both are pretty funny. Like I said, they have Marie in them, which is one of the funniest characters in the series. And for the new one, I believe they got back the original team. I don't know if it's Ron Gilbert and Tim Schafer on it, but
I know Ron Gilbert's on it for sure.
Yeah, and it's more of the same. Like, if you like this tone, there are a lot of games that will deliver this to you. And I was recently on an episode, well, not recently by the time you hear this, but of Side Quest, talking about my favorite point-and-click adventure game, which is Conquest of the Longbow, which is a Robin Hood-based game. And even that, like, again, rides a tone of, like, we want to give you this, like, medieval Robin Hood adventure, so it's not super, like, cartoony and funny. That's not what it is. But even still, it's like every time you click on the wrong thing, there's usually something interesting or funny that happens. And that's the genre. That's all of these.
Yeah, and I don't know when the next one of these I'll play is. It might be a more modern one like Curse of the Golden Idol. Case, I can never remember. I mix those
Case,
up.
I think.
Yeah, that game sounds really good, but it's mostly the Return of the Obra Dinn comparisons that game gets that makes me want to play that more so than point and click adventure gameplay. But I do have it in me to experience more fun little stories like these,
Yeah, I mean, it's what are you in the mood for, right? This is a very specific flavor of game, and think of something like anchovies, right? Like those can be really good when put on the right salad or in a pizza, like once in a while. You don't want to just eat cans and cans and cans of them. And I think point and click adventure games are kind of like that. Like this is a good flavor. It's good to spread it out, do it a little every once in a while. It's always going to be like you're never going to not have fun because the best ones are always delivering you something funny.
Mm-hmm.
How much you want to power through the puzzles themselves is kind of up to you.
Yeah. Well, we have powered through the story of The Secret of Monkey Island. I appreciate you taking almost 2 hours now to talk about this game. This has been awesome.
My pleasure. This has been a treat. I'm really glad we got to do this. Be happy to do it again anytime. I just these games were such a huge part of my childhood, and I know for a lot of people, they spend a lot of time pointing and clicking away. So, yeah, thanks again for the opportunity. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here. Definitely have you back on sometime. And for everybody listening, I appreciate you sticking it out to the end as always. If you want to listen to Nostalgium Arcanum, which I recommend, again, go down in the show notes, find the link. As I'm signing off the show, as you're listening to the music at the end of the episode here, queue up an episode of Nostalgium Arcanum. There's going to be something there for you that appeals to your nostalgia, because at this point, there's enough episodes. Something that's been done already will appeal to you. So,
oh yeah, for sure.
Thank you everybody for listening. And as always, tune in next week for the next game to come out of the backlog.